All right, we will call to order the Thursday, April 2nd, 2026 meeting of the Planning Commission. If we can start with roll call, please.
Chair Dennison,
Here.
Vice Chair Simcock,
Here.
Commissioner Brennan,
Here.
Commissioner Moran,
Here.
Commissioner Yu asked to be excused for this meeting.
All right, next up is approval of the agenda. Solicit an approval of the agenda as presented.
So moved.
Seconded.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Next up is our report from the City Council liaison.
Good afternoon, Chair Dennison and Planning Commission. Just a brief update on the last council meeting. We did have a couple presentations that were given to us. One was from Vector Control. We had former Mayor Capocha come, as well as one of the staff members. As you may know, John Capocha is actually the chair of the board for the Vector Control. So it's nice to have a familiar face. A couple things that he brought to light. One is it's going to be another bad mosquito season, but thankfully with some preemptive funding, they were able to get some kind of contraption in all the pools that were left behind in Altadena. And I think when they tested them, something like 90%, don't quote me, but had bugs ready to hatch in them. So good thinking by Vector Control. As you know, all of us pay for Vector Control in our property taxes. Another concern that they did raise is that I think they need to raise something like $1 million to keep operations going, because there wasn't any escalator, I think, in what we pay in our property taxes. And so in order to do that, they need to spend about $1 million to do a Prop 218 vote in order to get the ballot out. So just something to think about if for advocacy's sake. Does it make sense to spend $1 million to then raise $1 million for operations? Probably not. So that's an effect of Prop 218 and what they have to do to raise funds for operations and keeping us healthy. But they did remind us to, tip, toss, and protect. So anytime you have standing water, make sure you tip that out. If you have any receptacles that you're not using that may have previously had standing water in it, because the Aedes mosquito egg, not Aedes 80, but AEDES, I think. They can survive in dry conditions, and once rehydrated, they can then hatch. So anything that you don't use that could be a receptacle for water, make sure you throw that away. And then to protect yourself with, I think it's at least 30% DEET or lemon eucalyptus. He gave us 4 different options on things to protect, because there is some chikungunya and some other viruses that are being carried by these 2 mosquitoes, one being the Aedes mosquito and the other one being just the common one that we have. So that was one presentation. The other presentation, another interesting presentation, was from the Los Angeles County Department of Public Works. We had a few engineers out here to give us updates on our debris basins and the work they have done in the debris basins. They give us an update on the hundreds of thousands of cubic yards that they have pulled out of all of the debris basins above us. Remember, a dump truck, I think, takes about 10 cubic yards, and they were quoting hundreds of thousands of cubic yards that were taken out. So they did a good job, very good job preemptively to get the Sierra Madre Dam, which is not a dam, but really just as you guys know, kind of a pass-through. To get that ready for that February 13th storm that we had. And they pulled out a lot of debris prior to that big storm. So we only had, like a 15-minute over-the-top event. That being said, they're now in the process of repairing the top of the dam, so that walkway is going to be functional again. They showed us pictures of that. And just gave us a little background on the rail and timber structures, such as we have for Yucca Trail. We talked a little bit about the history of Yucca Trail, how that was a previous county property. They wanted to get rid of it. City of Sierra Madre thought that was not a good idea, so we took over ownership of it, which means that we took over the duty to then empty it. when that's necessary, but it really is, they even use that term that management analyst Carlson uses, chocolate milk. It's meant for that chocolate milk to flow through, not to stop some of that mud, but it's really to stop the big pieces of debris, and it did its job. I try to play with, maybe we can kind of get it back to the county if we take it down and you guys need it. So we'll see. I think the city managers reached out, but I don't think they're biting on that. So those were the two presentations. As far as discussions are concerned, one was an agenda item that I pulled from consent a couple meetings ago, but it came back to us. It's a downtown parking survey. I was very vocal that I was kind of against it for the amount of money that was being spent. But hearing the consultant and what his ideas were, I think it really could be money well spent. And so it was a unanimous decision to approve it, but it's my understanding it's coming back to the council in the next meeting. What else did we discuss? We also discussed one other larger item. Had to do with parking and stop signs. So right up your alley in Planning Commission. So we did get an engineering report. I think it all kind of stemmed out of my concern of the safety on West Grandview. We have a few schools within a short run, maybe a half a mile, and it's a very narrow corridor, and a lot of kids are crossing the street. I was concerned of safety, so they did a study. What they found was, yes, it is kind of dangerous. There is a lot of traffic and a lot of children crossing the street. What they also found from the engineer's perspective, and also for some residents and some local residents that have experience in traffic calming measure, the fact that it is narrow is actually traffic calming. So it's actually safer, probably not safe for property, because you could like take a mirror off here and there, but safer for pedestrians and speed issues. So us as a council, we gave guidance to not approve that, but when it came back to us, it was on there to approve it. So we did not approve that. We denied that recommendation from staff. We also kicked back to Mr. City Attorney, looking at the stop sign at Cannon and Grandview, because it was, according to the engineer report, it was not, did not meet one of the standards for a stop sign. So we wanted to make sure that we have guards against liability in some of those issues. We want to make sure the city is as safe as possible, but we'll hear back from the city attorney whether or not that is something that we could do or would want to do. But we did approve a couple other stop signs. I think notably, one is the recommendation was to swap the stop sign at Sunnyside and Mariposa, to go along Mariposa, have a stop instead of on Sunnyside. We weren't very enthusiastic about removing a stop sign. So we recommended, yes, we'll take your recommendation, but can we please leave those two stop signs that were there? And that came back to us, and that was approved. The other interesting one that was approved is it was a partnership between us and the city of Pasadena. So it'd be Mitchell-Linda and Grandview. A lot of people carry a lot of speed coming down the top of Mitchell-Linda to Grandview, and that's right there by Alverno. Again, a lot of people crossing over that street at that point. And so Pasadena has agreed, as we have, to put a stop sign there as well. So we'll have a stop sign there, and that was approved. So I think that's really the biggest recap on what we did. But like I said, a few things are going to be coming back to council. This is one of those odd months where we're going to have a break of, I think, 3 weeks, because the second Tuesday, we started this month on a Wednesday, so the second Tuesday comes a little bit after. But just keep an eye out for the agenda. I'm not sure what's going to be on it, but I think there are probably a couple items of interest that could be on the agenda that you might want to pay attention to. That concludes my report. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Great, thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Thanks for all the hard work that you do. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. All right, next up, we have a new agenda item, presentations.
Chair Dennison, we don't have any presentations today. We'll move on to the next item.
Okay, thank you. Next up is public comment for items not on the agenda. At this time, anybody may come before the Planning Commission to speak about any items that are not on the agenda. Please give your name and address when you come up to speak, and limit your comments to no more than 3 minutes. Hearing none, we will move on to a public hearing. Public hearing to investigate a potential public nuisance at 281 West Carter Avenue. I think we should start with ex parte visits. Any visits to the site where you learned something that was not included in the agenda packet?
I think as previously reported in a prior meeting, I've walked by that location numerous times, including, but not since our last meeting where that was disclosed.
Okay, hearing none else, we will move on to a presentation from staff.
Commission, I think at the last Planning Commission meeting that I didn't attend, there was some confusion about how code enforcement is done in the city. So I wanted to give just a quick overview of how code enforcement is done in the city, and then we're going to turn to the actual code enforcement item before us. Thank you. So as you probably know, I love decision trees, and here is the decision tree I use when we try to determine what kind of code enforcement action to take. The threshold question is, what is the issue we're trying to resolve? Is it a general municipal code violation? Is it an unlawful condition of property or some kind of unlawful conduct upon property? Or is there a building code violation? So those are the threshold questions we ask. Based on those threshold questions, we take some kind of action. General municipal code violations, everything we enforce can technically be treated as a general municipal code violation, and that's generally where we start. So if our code enforcement officer determines that there's some kind of violation going on, then where we start is here. Oh, I'm unable to use the laser on this. But there, if you look on the screen, it says administrative remedies, and then the rightmost option, administrative fines and penalties. That's where we start usually. So we issue people a notice of violation, and then if they fail to comply with the notice of violation, we begin to issue administrative citations. And those amounts, the 100, 200, 500, those are statutorily prescribed, so we can't change that. Every violation after the third one is just another 500 and another 500 and another 500, and just piles up. But sometimes finding people doesn't solve the problem. And ultimately, we want to solve the problem. And so it depends on what that problem is. And so looking at this very complex chart of how we process unlawful conditions of property, and this is like a nuisance too. If the administrative citation process doesn't work, one of the next steps can be what we just did at the prior meeting, which is we bring to the Planning Commission evidence that there's a nuisance activity taking place, and the Planning Commission schedules a public hearing. Once the Planning Commission schedules that public hearing, which is what's happening today, and if the Planning Commission were to make a determination that yes, there is a public nuisance on site, and you order that the nuisance be abated, then the property owner has two choices. Either they can abate it themselves, or they don't do anything, and then city attorney goes to court, gets an abatement order and a notice of inspection warrant from the court, and we go on site and we abate it ourselves. And once the city abates that nuisance and we've resolved the issue, then we file a lien or special assessment against the property for the cost borne by the city in the abatement of that nuisance. But there's a lot of different types of laws out there, really specialized stuff that probably we never have to worry about in Sierra Madre. So like there's like the red light abatement law, mostly for like prostitution and drugs. There's the drug home abatement law, gang home abatement law, very specialized procedures for specific types of nuisances. The one I talked about with the planning commission, that's the general nuisance abatement process. And that's what we're doing today. There's also building code violations, which have a separate procedure under state law, under the Health and Safety Code. I won't get into this so much because this doesn't really involve the planning commission. This is handled administratively and with the building official and fire marshal. But in sum, that's how abatement happens and code enforcement happens in the city. Before we turn to our code enforcement officer to provide us an update on the home at issue, I just want to see if there are any questions about the process.
I think that I'd love to get an understanding as to how a quasi-judicial appointed commission is where this stops.
As opposed to going to the city council.
Mm-hmm.
The reason is because the city council is the appellate body. So, yeah, that's the reason. They want to provide, you make the decision, and then you want to provide the applicant with the opportunity to appeal. And so once they appeal, it goes straight to the city council, and then if the city council makes a determination, then the administrative process is over.
It just seems that in instances where we have code enforcement directives and fire department directives, that coming to us is the slowest way possible to get this taken care of.
And it's the only way possible. If it's a public nuisance that we're dealing with, if it's a building code violation, different. There's a different procedure and it's faster. If we're dealing with general municipal violations of the municipal code, we have the administrative citation procedure, and there's other things we can do too. Like we can file in court, we can pursue criminal action, but we generally don't do stuff like that. Not only is that expensive, it's much more intrusive than this process. But when it comes to public nuisances, believe it or not, this is one of the few processes, this is the only process available to us. We have to come, because a public nuisance isn't it's not a building code, it's not an unsafe structure per se. There's just some activity happening at the site that the city has determined per its code constitutes a public nuisance to the community. So for example, that issue about like vector control that was mentioned earlier, mosquitoes. Mosquitoes are not an unsafe, they're not creating some kind of unsafe structure, but they present a public nuisance to the community. And then so we can deal with mosquitoes at the municipal code level too, if we wanted to, because it's a public nuisance.
Yeah. I understand they want to be the appellate body, and that made perfect sense when you said it. It doesn't feel like planning commission material to be making adjudication on private property.
But you issue permits, and it's essentially the same thing. In any case, it is an unusual procedure. This may be the first or second time we've ever done this at the Planning Commission, but it won't be the last, I'm sure.
Okay, thank you.
Turning this back to the code enforcement officer.
Good evening, Chair and Planning Commissioners. Upon my reinspection of the property 281 West Carter Avenue, as you see the before and after photos in front of you, which there has been some compliance that were met on the property. I did meet with the property owner, which both property owners are present here with me as well. So I'm going to start the slideshow. So in the beginning of the first inspection, as you can see, the debris, the outside storage on the side, all that was been removed, as well as the tarp of the vehicle. It's been removed and placed a proper car cover. The remaining other issues on the side yard and the front yard, they have been removed and cleaned up. The side yard of the property, which is on the west side of the house, that was all the substantial outside storage, all has been removed, as well as the vegetation. The roof line, which is fire code regarding the dried brush, leaves, overgrown hanging trees, were all removed and cleaned up. So that looks pretty good on that top of the roof, which is the front view of the property. This is also still looking at the front driveway of the front of the house. This is near the garage, just out to the side behind the vegetation, which all the outside storage in the back was removed and vegetation was cut back. Same thing, looking from the front of the property to the house, this would be on the south side. Most of the outside items or storage materials were all removed, and vegetation was also cut back as well. This is in the front yard, going towards the walkway. So most of the items that were in the front yard were all removed. There is some mulch that they use for the planters and the trees, so that's piled up on the side and the right side, if you can see that. This is on the opposite side, on the east side of the property. All the outside items were removed. Wheelbarrow was underneath the vegetation on the left, so now you can see it on the right, which is clean and free. This is the front side of the house. As you can see, most of the vegetation, all the dried trees, stumps, and brush was all removed, and looks great. This is continuing on the west side of the house. All that vegetation was what you call a weed tree, was growing on top of the roof of the side, so that all that was removed. This is also on the east side of the house, which was all covered up, and now it's all clean on the right side. You see all the roots that are still dangling on the side of the fence line. So pretty much all that was completely full and all on the top of the house and on the roof, but it's all been cut back nice. And so I'm waiting for the fire inspector to re-inspect the property so I can get also compliance from him. And this is looking from the street view. As you can see, most of the dried brush, trees, branches were all cut back and cleaned. So it's in compliance at this time, and it looks great. And this is still looking from the street view. On the side, there was an overgrown tree, as you can see from the left, hanging, and the root was sticking out. So it most likely would have been caused damage because the neighboring property felt that it was too close to the power line. Edison has gone out, but because of the tree was overgrown on one side, there was no vegetation on the backside. So as you can see, it was really, really leaning, and there was no way where they can actually save it unless they chop it more. So they ended up taking it down, and as you can see, the front yard looks great. You have a clean curbside and front parkway. Same thing looking from the driveway from the front street. Car cover replaced, all the debris was removed, and all the hanging night lights were actually removed. This is an aerial view from vector control that they usually respond to take a look at the poles, and because this was notated, I included this in the slideshow reflecting that the owner is usually in compliance with vector control and always removes the stagnant water in the rear pool. And that is my end of my show. Thank you.
Any questions for the inspector? So Inspector, you're happy with all of the work that's been done?
Yes, the work is in compliance in the front side yard. There is some other, maybe some substantial areas in the back, which, like I said, I have not gone to the backyard, but we did discuss with the owners and myself. We'll probably do a re-inspection maybe in about a month or so until things come settled.
So do you have a recommendation for us? Are we allowed to solicit that?
So staff's really happy. The process worked. And at this point, staff is recommending that if there's, after you take public comment, that we close the public hearing and you recommend that staff dismiss the code enforcement action.
Okay. Any questions for staff? All right. At this time, anybody may come forth and comment on this particular item, this agendized item only. Please give us your name and address and keep your comments limited to 3 minutes.
I'm ready to go home. I'm 281 West Carter, Sierra Madre. I bought the house 27 and a half years ago for under 300,000. And unfortunately, I do leave the leaves out because when it's fall, and then I use my mulcher to mulch it. It's just organic. And I know we already had a big fire, so I'm not really paranoid, but I did remove all the branches and I got rid of it. So I figure we're cool there. It just seems to me that the $300,000 house I bought is now in a $2 million neighborhood. So I guess I gotta bring up the level a little bit, I take it. But otherwise, I hope everybody has a good Easter, and I'd kind of like to go home now. And if everything's cool, we cool? He's nodding yes, so I'm gonna turn around, leave, and let you guys go home. How's that? All right, I see a lot of nods. Thank you. We'll see you in a few weeks.
No, we're trying really, really hard to make this work, so I appreciate your time. And Linda Home, by the way, that's my name.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, at this time, we will close the public hearing and move into discussion. Who would like to start?
I'll start. I mean, if he's happy, I'm good. I'd like to, I guess I'd like the fire inspector. I wish we could have that already, but that's kind of more my concern. But I guess I'm not sure if that's even really part of this. Is it? Is that part of the public hearing? Because we have the code enforcement and we have fire department.
Yeah, I'll ask the code enforcement officer, what specific violation triggered the fire inspector to go out there?
So in the beginning, it started off with the stagnant water. So years ago, Vector Control contacted me regarding the stagnant pool. There was non-compliance with 3 notices that were sent to him. So this is when I got involved regarding the outside storage and the junk and the trash. But because he was very not volatile and sometimes non-compliant with me, as you can see the way he acts. But I was always stooping to his level, given the opportunity to correct it. And time from time, and since I had this case since 2017, it overlaps and due to the pandemic, 2020, and the fires recently. So, and because of
But what specifically was the violation that the fire, I don't know if it was the fire marshal or fire inspector?
yes,
What specifically was the issue that
the
they,
overgrown vegetation.
it was the vegetation?
Vegetation on top of the roof.
So the vegetation has been addressed.
Okay. Thank you.
So it sounds like code enforcement's happy and the fire department concerns were met, so.
I'm happy, and I feel like there's a process, that giant flow chart, should there be future issues. So I feel like we could resolve this one.
I appreciate the presentation, and I appreciate the efforts of the owner to address the situation. So based on the pictures and the presentation, sounds like made substantial progress.
Yeah, I think that it sounds like this process worked, and luckily it didn't have to go any further than where it went. Hopefully, there will be maintenance of this, and we won't see this before us again. So it sounds like we are looking for a motion. What are we technically doing?
So the motion is to close the public hearing? The motion is to close the public hearing and to recommend to staff to dismiss the code enforcement action.
I recommend to close the public hearing and recommend to staff to close the enforcement action.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next up, consent calendar. Nothing on there. Discussion items. California Legislative Update Part 2. Here we go. I hope we get some more flow charts.
There will be more flow charts. If we could go, oh, thank you. So you received part one from my colleague Julia, and that dealt with ADUs primarily in SB9. This is going to be a lot of the multifamily housing laws, as well as permit streamlining. So you've probably seen this slide before, but I always kind of like to start with the big picture, which is why is the state doing this, right? And the state's passing all these housing laws because they're trying to increase the production of housing. And the way you increase production of housing is you have to look at what factors they can control. There's land, capital, labor, and the legislation/regulation that creates the framework for all this stuff. And the state's trying to do things on labor. They're trying to do things, they can't do much on land except offering state lands. And they're trying to offer capital to promote construction. But what the state has most control over is local regulation and state law. And so that's where they're leaning heavy to lift local impediments to development and to create state incentives. So every zoning code has these 4 elements: uses, development standards, procedures, and enforcement. And the state is weighing in on all of the different elements of a zoning code. So for example, as it relates to uses, they're allowing you, they're requiring through the housing element process that we zone for housing. They are allowing residential uses in non-residential zones. So they're really changing the way traditionally we've had uses defined in the zoning code. They're changing development standards. They're just waiving them under density bonus law. They're easing them under like ADU law, SB9, SB35 developments. They're making the procedures faster. They're creating shot clocks for the city. They are removing our discretionary authority over development projects, right? So they're changing the process. And also there's the enforcement element, and they're enforcing heavily, both through HCD and through the Attorney General. If you're following this in the news, you'll see every month or so, a new city gets a letter from the Attorney General saying, change whatever practice you're doing, or we're going to sue you on behalf of the state of California. Not something that happened in the past. So you've seen this chart before, and every year I add to it, and it just gets bigger, and I don't know what I'm going to do next year because PowerPoint can't take any more little squares. But I'm gonna break down the relevant sections by offering you this easier to read version. So if we're to put this in context, we're only talking about residential development applications. We're not talking about commercial, we're not talking about industrial. If we're in the world of residential development applications, what matters is, are we dealing with one unit or are we dealing with multiple units? That's the threshold question there. If we're dealing with one unit in a single family zone, there are no laws out there that require us to build affordable in single family zones. It's all market rate. And it's single family ADUs, SB9s. The idea under state law is, as it relates to single family zones, we're not going to deed restrict these affordable, meaning we're not going to require you to rent them out or sell them at affordable rates, but we're going to make them affordable by design. Because ADUs are smaller, SB9 units are smaller, and the lots allow you through the lot split process for SB9, you get smaller lots. So while these might not be deed restricted affordable, the state is saying we're gonna push affordability through design. All right, now looking at that other orange, multiple units. You can have now multiple units in a single family zone. through the SB9 law, ADU law, single-family homes. You can get, in a single-family zone now, under state law, you can get up to 4 units. So your individual parcels, assuming they can accommodate that number of units, through some combination of SB9, ADU law, and existing municipal code, can get up to 4 units on a single parcel. In a multifamily zone, right, multiple units, multifamily, you can push for a market rate development using these different types of laws, or you can get affordable housing using a different set of laws. And in a non-residential zone, which is totally unique, I think this first happened about 5 years ago or 3 years or 4 years ago. Never before could you build housing in non-residential zones by right. Now you can. And there are a lot of laws you can use now to build housing in non-residential zones. This is the new push. So with this framework in mind, let's look at some of the new laws. AB 648, community college housing. So this applies to the, for example, like PCC or the Sierra Madre Community College. Should you want to build housing there, you can, and it need not comply with the local zoning ordinances. A community college can build housing now on its own property without complying with local municipal code. That's a big deal. And the reason for that is, according to the author, he says, data from the Legislative Analyst's Office indicates that roughly 60% of community college students report housing insecurity and nearly 25% experience homelessness. So the rate of homelessness among community college students, self-reported, is remarkably high, much higher than the average for California residents at 25%. Campus development zones. This is kind of like the other one, effective, and this was effective in the past, so there's an amendment to this year, that's why I'm covering it. Effective 2023, AB 2011 created streamlined ministerial approval for certain projects. If it was within a zone where office, retail, or parking areas were principally permitted, the parcel wasn't greater than 20 acres, 75% adjoined urban uses, propose a certain percentage of affordable housing, within, this is the important part, within a commercial corridor. Commercial corridor, think of like the big boulevards, like a Colorado Boulevard or something like that. This law was amended to state that not only does it apply in commercial corridors, it also applies in campus development zones. And a campus development zone means a set of parcels that are contained either wholly or partially within 1/2 mile radius of a main campus. So if you own a parcel located near a campus development zone, so located near a UC, CSU, or community college, you have expanded development rights now. So their property values, at least their development potential, just went up. This doesn't apply to private colleges. This is only public universities, UC, CSUs, community colleges. Effective 2023, AB 2295, again, an older one that's going to be amended, that's amended this year. AB 2295 created streamlined ministerial approval for certain housing development projects consisting of at least 10 housing units located on real property, offer a certain percentage of affordable housing. This new law amends AB 2295 to expand on the affordability requirements, and it's intended to provide housing for teachers. So you see it's land located on real property owned by a local education agency, and it's intended to be teacher workforce housing.
So I'm trying to think applicability of stuff like this, and it would be something like one of the 2 public schools in town decided that they were no longer going to have grass out on their big fields and they converted it to housing, they would be able to do that.
Yes. And it's relevant for the Pasadena Unified School District because they have so many sites that they're not using for schools and they're considering closing down.
Yeah, they're closing them.
Those can turn into housing very quickly now. And they're actively contemplating that.
Not as hard as they're actively contemplating closing schools, but yes.
AB 507, adaptive reuse, creates streamlined administrative approval for certain adaptive reuse projects, which may be residential or mixed use. Adaptive reuse project is a use by right in all zones if a certain percentage of the project is affordable, project site is 20 acres or less, not located in industrial zone, non-residential uses of mixed use projects are consistent with local jurisdictions requirements, 75% adjoining parcels. What's happening here? What's happening is there are a lot of commercial buildings that are vacant because these big box retailers are going out of business, because a lot of these downtown buildings, people don't want to work because they're working remotely. They don't want to commute to downtown. The vacancy rate is really high. The state is trying to figure out a way to make these vacant spaces livable quickly. And so that's what this adaptive reuse project is all about, converting some of these formerly commercial spaces into residential development. These are all really complex laws with a lot of rules attached to them. So this is just a high-level overview.
Sorry, can you go back to that last one?
Sure.
Remind us what affordable means.
Affordable means what it means under the density bonus law. So there are different categories of affordability, and moderate income is like, let's say, the most expensive affordable category, followed by low income, followed by very low income, followed by extremely low income. And the way you determine that is you figure out in your county, what is the median income? So like in LA County, median income for a family of four is something like $110,000 or $15,000, something like that. And then you find, okay, based on that median income, who makes, I'm gonna turn this up, it's like 110% a median income household is, sorry, a moderate income household makes something like 110% of median income, is that right? So if you make 110% of the median income in your county, then you're considered moderate, and the development can be counted as affordable, if that makes sense. There's different levels of affordability. Different levels of affordability give you different benefits. But the most expensive level of affordability is moderate income. Transit-oriented development. This failed last year, but it passed this year. And effective July 1st, 2026, so in a few months, SB 79 creates a streamlined ministerial approval process for certain housing development projects located in an urban transit county, like LA County, in a residential mixed or commercial development zone, within a half mile of a transit-oriented development, which we don't have in Sierra Madre, with at least 5 dwelling units and provides certain percentage of affordable units. This, if you ever heard of SB 35, SB 35 created dense developments along like light rail, for example. This is SB 35 on steroids. It allows higher development, like taller development, denser development, so long as you're within a half mile of a transit-oriented development, transit-oriented development stop. Again, we don't have this in Sierra Madre. I'm just making you aware. This definitely applies to Pasadena.
I just looked it up in the LA County 2025 four-person household limit for moderate is $127,900.
127.
That's for a four-person household. It varies based on household, but
Right, right. 127. So if you make 127,000 as a family, you're low income. You'd qualify as moderate at least. So everything in red is new. So we don't really have any, you can see, if it was in the first category, one new unit or multiple units in the single family zones, then this impacts Sierra Madre. But we don't really have any new laws that heavily impact Sierra Madre. It's all the larger cities like our neighbor Pasadena. Now the next slides will impact Sierra Madre. AB 920 requires a centralized application portal. By January 1st, 2028, cities with a population of 150,000, I'm sorry, this one won't. Cities with a population of 150,000 or more must develop a centralized application portal for applicants of housing development projects. The portal will be posted to the city website, include all application materials, track the status of projects. We are already doing that. Even though it doesn't apply to us, we're already doing it. So we're ahead of the game. AB 1007, responsible agency approvals. CEQA recognizes that there are lead agencies and responsible agencies. Generally speaking, the city is 9 times out of 10 the responsible agency. Sorry, the lead agency. A responsible agency might be like a sewer, like the LA County Sanitation could be a responsible agency, because maybe they have some kind of secondary approval over a project. Maybe like the Vector Control District. Some public agency out there, usually districts, usually special districts, that have some kind of secondary approval, they're the responsible agencies. Under CEQA, lead agencies have strict timelines for making CEQA determinations and approving projects thereafter. Now, responsible agencies also have timelines. Applies more to districts than to the city. This is the one I really want to get to. Building inspections. So this, well, let me state first what existing law says. Existing law requires that if the local enforcement agency, meaning the city, fails to conduct an inspection of permitted work within 60 days of receiving notice of completion of the permitted work, the permittee may be entitled to reimbursement of the permit fees. So the way this works is, this is after we've issued all the entitlement permits that you all issue here. It goes to the staff. They apply for like a building permit, let's say. Staff issues the building permit. They do the work under the building permit. Then they provide notice to staff that they've completed the work. Well, they don't just get to inhabit that structure. We have to do an inspection to determine whether or not their construction under the building permit satisfies the conditions under the building code. So they give us notice, and we go out there and we do the inspection. Now, existing law says we have to do that inspection within 60 days. Over here in Sierra Madre, the turnaround is a lot faster. It doesn't really take that long. This law said, and if we fail to do that inspection within 60 days, we have to give them their permit fees back. This law says that a local building department needs to inspect a residential project with fewer than 10 units within 10 business days of receiving a notice of completion for permitted work authorized by a building permit. What was happening in other cities is that the work would be done, and then it would just take them a really long time to inspect. And sometimes they'd have to forfeit the fee, the building permit fee. But it doesn't mean they have to sign off on it. Here, we have 10 days. I mean, this is most of our projects in the city, right? Fewer than 10 units. Here, we have 10 business days now. When we receive notice that they've built to do the inspection, we have 10 business days to do that inspection. And if we fail to do that inspection within 10 days, they don't automatically get approval, but they can go to court and sue us. So we have to be diligent in our inspections. And that's really a Wildan thing. I mean, we contract with the Wildan for that service, and I don't know what the turnaround time is usually for inspections, but
Usually the next day or within the week.
yeah, it's usually really quick. Written policies. We need to adopt, so the state law has been amended, the Permit Streamlining Act's been amended, so that each agency is required to publish the criteria it will apply to determine the completeness of development application and the type of approval and a bunch of other things that we need to include in this application process. We're in the process of doing that. We're revamping our application forms so that we're very clear on what the permit is you're applying, every requirement that you need to satisfy for that specific permit, including payment of fees, etc. So we're in the process of reworking that form, reworking our forms and drafting policies for that. Private plan check. This is the other big one that applies to Sierra Madre. So this statute's titled the Residential Private Permitting Review Act. It requires a city to prepare a residential building permit fee schedule and post online, which we do. And it allows a developer to hire a private company to do a plan check for residential building permits and provide a report to the city, as opposed to the city doing that, when the city determines that it can't get that done in 30 days. So before, what would happen is we would get this building permit application, and we would have 30 days to review it. And generally speaking, we get it done in that time, but sometimes for whatever reason, something might take longer, or maybe staff doesn't have the resources or something. We would farm that work out to Wildan or some other contractor. Under this law, we can tell the property owner that you can hire private property owner, a private company, to do the plan check for us, and we will review that plan checker's work. So just another way the legislators are trying to speed up the process.
Do the fees get lessened
Uh,
or something for that? I mean,
yeah, we haven't even, they should.
yeah, I mean,
Because-
if we're not doing the work.
Yeah,
then they
because
should
the
let
fee-
somebody else do the work.
Yeah, the fees need to reflect the cost of service. So for something like this, it should. I just don't know. I mean, I don't know. Again, I'll turn to staff. Turnaround time for plan check and the building permits, more or less, how many days do we turn things around? Any idea?
So currently for a construction plan check set, our turnaround for each discipline is about 2 weeks.
So we're under the 30 days. So this doesn't really come up that much for us. It might, but it doesn't really come up for us in the city. We just don't have that much development happening.
And do we have any purview over who it is that they use? Or can they go to Joe's House of Plan Check?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm sure the law addresses it. I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay.
So this is what the process looks like now for applications from beginning to end. Discretionary review depends on whether it's ministerial or discretionary, right? But there's a timeline for everything now. This did not exist before. Before we had one rule. When we got an entitlement application, we had to process it in 30 days. Permit Streamlining Act. There was only one rule. Now we have a timeline for every step. That's also true for the post-entitlement phase process, right? Building permits, things like that. Post-entitlement, so here are the steps. I misspoke earlier. I said 30 days. It's actually 15 business days. So we get a post-entitlement application in, right? We as staff have 15 business days to make a determination whether the application is complete. Not whether we're ready to issue, but just that you've submitted everything you need to submit. After that, we have 30 days to determine whether that application, we're going to grant the permit based on that application. If we determine for whatever reason that we can't turn that application around in 30 days, they can pursue that private plan check process. They issue a private plan check report, we review that report, and then we can issue a building permit. And then it goes to and then they build on it. After they build on it, they give us notice, and then they ask us to inspect, and then we have 10 days to inspect, 10 business days to inspect. And if we fail to inspect within those 10 business days, they can sue us. And after the inspection, we should be issuing a certificate of occupancy or whatever the Sierra Madre equivalent is for allowing people to live in their homes.
So am I reading this appeal process right, that we have 15 business days to let them know if it's complete based on the now published standards that we have to publish? And if we say it isn't, then they have 10 days to appeal, and then 60 days before Planning Commission has to give them a decision as to the completeness?
Yep, that's right.
Wouldn't it just be easier for them to rework it?
Which is what happens most of the time.
Okay.
But I'm involved in another situation now, not in this city, where city staff is saying your application is incomplete, and they're saying, the applicant is saying, no, it's not. We've given you everything, and they're going to appeal that determination of staff. So it happens sometimes. So this is the end of the presentation, I believe. So a lot happening in housing law. Sierra Madre, fortunately, is spared being a smaller city.
So the biggest effect, I think, that I took away from that is that they can basically freely convert uses if it's going to end up being a single family.
Freely convert uses?
So in other words, like if they're going to do an adaptive reuse, or if they're going to convert commercial to residential, they have a lot of leeway.
Yes, but all that only applies, all those laws I covered only apply to the multifamily zones or to commercial zones. So it wouldn't apply to a single family zone.
So I think we're a commercial from all the way down the boulevard, pretty much, right? From
Yes,
Paco's Ensenada to
it could happen here.
Taylor's,
It could happen on Sierra Madre Boulevard. It's possible. Yeah.
and then
possible.
Montecito.
In Montecito. Yeah. Measure V area. Yep.
And going back to, at least my recollection is when the housing element was last, I want to say last updated, but maybe created, there was an effort by the city to look at, I think every housing element, as you mentioned, has to have the best efforts by the city generally to look at areas where we could be building, right? Housing element is due for an update when?
It's once every 8 years. I don't know when the next one is.
The next cycle starts at 2029.
2029.
So we'll
Okay.
be start preparing in a year or two.
Mhm. Okay, thank you.
Other questions for staff? Thank you. All right, any reports from Planning Commission? Nope. All right. Report from city staff.
Chair Dennison, so our next Planning Commission meeting, we'll be reviewing a municipal code text amendment for ADU. It's coming back to you as a public hearing. And also, we will receive a Alverno master plan for their school, the annual updates on their sports court and their new projected constructions on site. And also a tentative parcel map for a small lot subdivision at 444 North Lima. That
Okay.
concludes my report.
And does staff have enough guidance on the ADU text amendment, or do we need to form a subcommittee to help?
Thank you for the question. I do believe we have enough direction, and we did receive some response from HCD on the questions that were posed.
Great. All right, thank you very much. All right, if there's nothing further, then we'll go ahead and adjourn to our next regular meeting of April 16th. Thank you.